The one word Neville, repeated 1,000 times until he was wealthy. Neville Goddard taught that a single word, spoken from the feeling of already being, can quietly become the substance of your entire outer life. Turn with me to Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 18, where it is written, "But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth." And Neville read this not as ancient history about a wandering tribe, but as a psychological instruction whispered to you, the individual, this very moment. For the Lord thy God is not a figure enthroned somewhere beyond the clouds. The Lord thy God is your own wonderful human imagination, the I am that you are. And the power to get wealth is not a power you must go out and hunt for in the world. It is a power already resting inside your own consciousness, waiting only to be remembered, waiting only to be assumed, waiting only to be felt as true before it ever appears as fact. Say it with me. I am wealthy. I am at ease. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am wealthy. I am at ease. Imagination creates my reality. And if these words landed on you today, the way they were meant to land, I gently invite you to subscribe now, so that tomorrow's teaching finds you again, and the thread of this remembering is never broken. Before we go further, type the two words, I am wealthy, in the comments below. Not as a hope, but as a quiet vow to yourself. Let it be the first outer sign of an inner decision. The first key is this: wealth is not a thing you chase, it is a state you enter. Neville Goddard taught that there are countless states of consciousness, suspended in the vast unseen, like rooms in a great house you have never bothered to open. Poverty is a room, struggle is a room, and wealth, ease, abundance. This too is simply a room already built and already furnished, waiting quietly for someone to walk in and take a seat, as though they had always belonged there. Picture a man standing in a narrow hallway of his own mind. One door marked lack, worn smooth from years of his hand upon it, and just beside it, unnoticed, another door, quiet, untouched, marked wealthy. He has passed that second door 10,000 times without ever turning the handle, not because it was locked, but because he forgot it was even there. You do not create wealth from nothing. You move, in consciousness, into the room where wealth already is. This is why chasing money in the outer world so often leaves a person tired and empty, because he was rearranging furniture in the room of lack, instead of simply crossing the hall into the room of plenty. The word that Neville is said to have repeated quietly, privately, almost like a heartbeat beneath his day, was the single word wealthy, not shouted, not forced, but murmured, the way you might hum a tune while washing dishes or walking to your car, said again while waiting on a train, said again in the stillness before answering the phone, until the word stopped being a word and became a feeling, and the feeling stopped being a mood and became an atmosphere, and the atmosphere stopped being temporary and quietly became simply who he was. So speak this decree with me. I now enter the room already prepared for me. Again, I now enter the room already prepared for me. The second key is this: the word must be repeated, not with the lips alone, but with the whole of your attention resting inside it. Neville Goddard taught that repetition without feeling is merely noise, but repetition soaked in feeling becomes a ladder. Each time you say the word wealthy and feel the ease of a person who already is, you climb one rung higher out of the old state and into the new. Think of how a child learns a language, not by memorizing rules, but by being immersed, hearing the same sounds again and again, until one day the sounds simply become knowing. This is how imagination absorbs a word into being. You do not repeat, I am wealthy, to convince some outside force. You repeat it to soak your own subconscious in the tone of a person for whom wealth is simply normal, simply obvious, simply true. Picture someone standing at the kitchen counter each morning, coffee warming their hands, softly repeating the single word wealthy, while their mind wanders to the bills stacked by the door. That repetition, though technically spoken, climbs nowhere. It is a foot tapping the same step over and over, without ever lifting. But picture that same person pausing, closing their eyes for just a breath, letting the words settle into the chest, the way warmth settles into a cold room. Feeling for a moment the quiet ease of someone who has never once worried about money. That single felt repetition does more in 3 seconds than 1,000 distracted repetitions could do in a year. Because the ladder is not climbed by the tongue, it is climbed by the attention, and attention only climbs when it is warmed by feeling. Now picture that same counter, that same coffee cup. 3 weeks later, the bills are still stacked by the door, but something in the way the person glances at them has changed. There is no flinch anymore. There is only a mild, almost amused patience, as though the bills were simply guests who had not yet realized the party was already paid for. This is what climbing actually looks like from the inside. It is not a sudden leap. It is a slow, almost invisible softening. The same way a stiff hand slowly loosens after it has been unclenched for long enough. No single morning felt like progress. And yet every morning was a rung. And here is where most people go astray. They say the word once, glance around at their bank account, see no change, and conclude the word failed. But Neville Goddard taught that the outer world is only a mirror with a delay built into it. The reflection always comes, but it comes on the mirror's schedule, not yours. So you keep repeating, not out of desperation, but out of the quiet confidence of someone climbing a ladder they already know leads somewhere. Think also of how a single drop of water falling again and again on the very same stone does not appear, on any given afternoon, to have accomplished anything at all. The stone looks unchanged, the drop looks wasted, and yet the shape of that stone is being decided, quietly, patiently, by every drop that ever fell, whether or not anyone was there to notice. Your repeated word is that drop, and your old doubting state is that stone. And the ladder you climb is simply the slow yielding of the harder thing to the softer thing that never stopped believing in itself. So you do not need to feel the ladder moving beneath your feet to know that you are climbing it. You only need to keep placing feeling, rung after rung, into the word. So speak this decree with me. Each felt word I speak lifts me one rung higher. Again, each felt word I speak lifts me one rung higher. The third key is this. The word only becomes flesh in the state akin to sleep. Neville Goddard taught again and again that the border just before sleep, that drowsy hush when the body is heavy but the mind is still faintly awake, is the most fertile ground the human being ever stands on. For in this state the critical, arguing, doubting faculty grows quiet, like a watchman who has finally gone home for the night. And in that hush, imagination is left alone with the mind, free to plant whatever it likes without contradiction. Think of a man who spends his whole day at a desk being told gently and repeatedly by the numbers in front of him that he is behind, that he is stretched thin, that wealth belongs to other people in other rooms. If he carries that argument to bed with him, wide awake, replaying the numbers, rehearsing the lack, he is simply handing the fertile hour of the night back over to the very state he wished to leave. But if instead he lets the body go heavy, lets the thinking grow slow and thick like honey, and in that thickness simply feels the word wealthy, the way you would feel a warm coat settle onto your shoulders on a cold evening. No argument, no proof, only the sensation of it, received and enjoyed. He has done something the desk and the numbers could never do. He has gone underneath the argument entirely. This is why Neville counseled going to that inner room each night before sleep, and simply feeling the word, not analyzing it, not defending it, not rehearsing how it might come true. Just feeling wealthy, the way sunlight is felt on skin, complete in itself, needing no explanation. Think of the moon reflected on still water. The moon does not force its image onto the lake. It does not argue its way in. The lake is simply still enough, quiet enough, to receive it perfectly. and your mind before sleep is that lake, restless all day with traffic and argument and worry, but for these few minutes finally still, and the word wealthy, whispered gently into that stillness, is the moon settling in, undisturbed, whole, entire. This is also why the same word spoken at noon, in the middle of argument and traffic and worry, so often seems to do so little. It is not that the word is weaker at noon, it is that the lake is not yet still enough to hold the reflection. So the wise man learns to wait for his own stillness, the way a fisherman waits for calm water, unhurried, knowing the hour will come, and when you wake, though nothing outside has changed yet, something inside has. The seed has gone in, past the place where doubt can reach it, and from there it grows the way all seeds grow, unseen, underground, patient, until the day it breaks the surface as circumstance. So the desk, the numbers, the argument of the day, none of it is quarreled with directly. It is simply outlasted, night after night, by a lake that keeps growing stiller and a moon that keeps arriving right on time. So speak this decree with me. Tonight my stillness is the soil where my word takes root. Again, tonight my stillness is the soil where my word takes root. The fourth key is this: you must live in the end, not on the way to the end. Neville Goddard taught that most people pray for wealth the way a beggar prays, standing outside the door of the mansion, hands cupped, hoping someone inside will notice. But the one who truly understands imagination does not stand at the door. He walks through it. He sits down at the table already set for him. He feels the chair beneath him, the warmth of the room around him. He does not wait to be invited, because in consciousness he has already arrived. And this single shift from waiting to arriving is the quiet hinge on which this entire teaching turns. Think of a man who has applied for a position he deeply wants, and instead of anxiously checking his phone every hour, wondering, hoping, bargaining with fate, he simply begins, that same evening, to feel the quiet satisfaction of a man who already has the job. He does not announce it to his neighbors. He does not need proof yet. He simply carries himself through his evening, the way a person carries himself once the striving is finished. He sleeps a little easier. He eats his dinner without the tight knot in his stomach. He even, quietly, in his own mind, begins thanking whatever it is he trusts for a decision already made. This is what Neville Goddard meant by living in the end, not performing hope, but resting in certainty. Because a wish still straining toward an outcome is confessing, with every strain, that the outcome has not happened yet, while an assumption already living inside the end is confessing the opposite, that it is already done. And consciousness, being the true creative power behind all experience, can only build outward from whatever it is you are actually assuming, not from what you are hoping to someday assume. Now picture a woman waiting to hear back about a small loan for her business. The kind of waiting that fills a whole week with a low, quiet hum underneath everything she does. She checks her email before she brushes her teeth. She checks it again before bed. And each unanswered inbox feels like another vote cast against her. This is a woman standing outside a door, straining to hear whether it will open. But suppose instead she does something quieter and far more powerful. Suppose one evening she stops checking altogether and simply imagines the moment the approval arrives. Not the checking, not the waiting, but the relief itself. The exhale, the small laugh of gratitude. She feels her own hand already signing the papers. She feels the calm of a decision already settled. She does this not once, but several evenings in a row. Not as a performance, not as a magic trick to force the bank's hand, but simply because she has decided to live, inwardly, as the woman for whom this is already resolved. And notice what has actually shifted. Nothing outside her has changed yet, but she has stopped confessing lack with her posture, her breath, her checked and rechecked phone. She has moved from the hallway into the room itself, and it is this inward move, and only this inward move, that consciousness can build upon. because imagination never builds from where you wish to be. It builds only from where you have quietly agreed to stand. This is why so many affirmations quietly fail. A person will say, "I am wealthy," with their lips, while every cell of their body is still leaning forward, still straining toward a future moment, still essentially standing outside the door, checking to see if it has opened yet. And imagination, ever faithful, ever obedient, simply gives back exactly that. More straining, more standing outside, more waiting for a door that never quite opens. Because you cannot lean toward a thing and rest in it at the same time. A man cannot half sit in a chair. Either he is standing, straining, hovering above the seat, or he has lowered himself fully into it and let it hold his weight. Wealth works the same way in the imagination. Either you are hovering above the assumption, testing it, checking it, ready to leap back out the moment doubt whispers, or you have lowered your whole weight into it and let it hold you. So when you say the single word wealthy, you are not asking to become wealthy someday, you are remembering that you are wealthy now, in the only place wealth can ever truly exist first, which is your own awareness, your own I am. Picture it plainly. A chair is set at a table. The meal is warm. The room is lit. And the only question left is whether you will stand outside pretending the door is locked, or simply walk in and sit down, as though you had never doubted for a moment that the seat was yours. The door was never locked. It was only ajar, waiting for someone with enough quiet confidence to push it open and walk through without asking permission. And once that awareness settles into the end already accomplished, the outer world has no honest choice but to slowly rearrange itself to agree with what you have quietly decided is true. The check arrives by a route you did not plan. The opportunity appears through a door you never knocked on. Not because you begged the world to change, but because you stopped begging altogether and simply took your seat. This is not wishful thinking. This is the very mechanics of a mind that creates by belief, rather than by effort. And once you understand it, you will notice how much of your life you have spent standing at doors you were always free to walk through. So speak this decree with me. I am not waiting at the door. I am seated at the table. Again, I am not waiting at the door. I am seated at the table. The fifth key is this. Everyone you meet, everyone who plays a part in your financial life, the employer, the client, the landlord, the stranger who writes the check, all of it is you pushed out. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world is not separate from you. It is your own consciousness dramatized, projected outward the way a single beam of light becomes countless shapes on a screen. And so when your inner sense of wealth changes, the people around you do not need to be convinced, persuaded, or manipulated. They simply begin to move, without knowing why, in ways that agree with your new inner state. The raise appears from a source you did not petition. The opportunity arrives through a person you barely remember. The money comes by a route your reasoning mind never could have planned. And this is because you were never actually dealing with those people as separate powers over your fate. You were dealing with your own assumption, mirrored back at you wearing different faces. Picture the man who dreads his landlord. Every month he rehearses the knock at the door, the stern voice, the late fee. He has built, quite unknowingly, an entire character out of his own fear. And the landlord, without ever being told, seems to arrive right on cue to play the very part that was written for him. The man calls this bad luck. He calls it a difficult landlord. He never suspects that the landlord is simply answering a casting call sent out nightly from his own troubled imagination. Now picture that same man, quietly changing the inner scene, feeling, before sleep, the ease of a tenant who is trusted, respected, never worried. He does not go to the landlord and argue. He does not even mention rent. He simply changes what he is being on the inside. And weeks later, the landlord, unprompted, mentions a fair arrangement, or forgets to raise the rent at all, or simply stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a neutral, ordinary person. Nothing about the landlord changed. Everything about the tenant did. and the landlord, being only a character playing out the tenant's own assumption, had no choice but to follow the new script. This is why Neville Goddard taught that you are always the only person in the room, no matter how many bodies appear to be standing in it. The employer who seems to withhold your raise is not a fixed obstacle outside you. He is a reflection of some quiet doubt still lingering in your own sense of worth. And the moment that doubt is replaced by the calm certainty of a person who is already valued, already secure, already provided for, the employer, the client, the customer, all of them begin, mysteriously, to agree, not because you bent their will, but because their will was never truly separate from your own consciousness in the first place. Think of a lake, surrounded by many mirrors. If you stand at the center and frown, every mirror frowns back. If you stand at the center and grow calm and certain, every single reflection softens to match you. And it would be absurd to walk from mirror to mirror, trying to rearrange each frown by hand. The only sane work is to change the one face being reflected. This is the whole secret behind manifesting through other people. You stop asking how to get the money from them, and you start asking what within me is still assuming lack, poverty, delay, and once that inner assumption is replaced, the very people you once feared or resented become, without any effort on their part, the quiet instruments of your own new belief. So when the stranger writes the check, when the client says yes, when the opportunity arrives through someone you barely know, understand that you are not witnessing outside luck. You are witnessing your own inner state, dressed for a moment in someone else's coat. And once you accept this fully, you stop being a victim of other people's moods, their opinions, their decisions about your worth, because you finally see that every one of them is simply you, pushed out, playing a part you yourself, quietly and unknowingly, wrote, "So speak this decree with me. The world before me is only myself, wearing new light." Again, the world before me is only myself, wearing new light. The sixth key is this: the self-concept you carry, quietly, wordlessly, underneath all your thinking, is the real engine behind the word you repeat. Neville Goddard taught that it is not enough to say wealthy 1,000 times if underneath it you still secretly believe yourself to be someone poor, someone unlucky, someone who never quite gets the breaks. For the subconscious does not obey the word alone, it obeys the self-concept the word is spoken from. This is why two people can say the exact same affirmation, "I am wealthy," and one becomes wealthy while the other remains exactly as they were. The difference is never the words themselves. It is the concept of self that is quietly, invisibly, standing behind those words, like a puppeteer behind a curtain. Picture two men saying the same sentence in the same tone. One has spent years quietly telling himself money slips through his hands, that he is the sort who almost makes it, but never quite does. And though his lips form the word wealthy, his whole inner posture still bows toward lack. The other has begun, however tentatively, to picture himself as someone for whom money simply arrives, someone unhurried about it. And though his outer circumstances may look identical to the first man's today, his word is landing on entirely different soil. One falls on stone, the other falls on ground already turned and softened. So before you repeat the word again tonight, ask yourself honestly, who do I believe myself to be? Do I believe I am the kind of person wealth happens to, or do I believe I am the kind of person wealth passes over? Notice how this belief shows itself in small, unnoticed moments, in how you speak of money to others, in the tone you use when a bill arrives, in whether you flinch or stay calm when an unexpected expense appears. These small daily reactions are the self-concept revealing itself in the open, long before any bank statement confirms it. And if you find the old concept still lingering, do not fight it, do not shame yourself for it. Shame only feeds the very state you are trying to leave. Simply begin to quietly retire it, the way you would retire an old employee with gratitude for their long service. Thank the old belief for whatever it once protected you from, and let it go without a struggle, and hire in its place a new self-concept, one that assumes ease the way it once assumed struggle, one that walks through a room the way a person of means walks through a room, unhurried, unafraid, unimpressed by scarcity, because scarcity is no longer a fact it recognizes as its own. Think of how differently a person moves through a grocery store when they are simply picking up what they need versus when they are anxiously calculating every item against a shrinking number. The body itself changes. The shoulders, the breath, the pace of the hand reaching for the shelf. This bodily ease is not something you wait for money to grant you. It is something you assume first, in imagination, and the outer scene eventually catches up to match the posture you have already claimed. This new self-concept is not arrogance. It is simply accuracy. For you were never actually poor in truth. You were only mistaken about who you were. A case of mistaken identity, carried perhaps for years, perhaps since childhood, absorbed from a household, a culture, a passing remark that was never even meant to become a life sentence. And the single word, wealthy, repeated with feeling, is the tool by which the mistake is quietly corrected, layer by layer, the way patient hands might restore an old painting, gently removing what time and neglect had layered over the original image, until the true picture underneath is finally visible again. Until the new self-concept is simply what remains when the old confusion has worn away. So speak this decree with me. I retire the old self and I hire the one who already has. I retire the old self and I hire the one who already has. The seventh key is this: persistence in the assumption is the quiet discipline that separates those who merely dabble with imagination from those who actually live by it. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world will almost always offer resistance before it offers agreement. The bill will still arrive, the bank statement will still show the old number, the doubting voice of a well-meaning friend will still whisper caution, and in that gap between the assumption you are holding and the evidence still lagging behind it, most people abandon the word. They said wealthy for 3 days, and when the check did not come on the fourth, they decided imagination does not work. But a lantern carried through a storm does not go out simply because the wind is blowing. It is built, by design, to keep burning precisely when conditions are against it. And this is what your assumption must become. Not a fragile hope that needs perfect calm to survive, but a steady flame that keeps burning through the very storm, meant to test whether you truly believed it or were merely trying it out. Picture a woman who has decided, quietly, to assume the state of the wealthy self. She wakes on a Tuesday morning and opens an envelope she was dreading, and the number inside is worse than she feared. In that instant, the old world rushes in with all its familiar arguments. Look at the number. Look at the evidence. Surely the word has failed you. And this is the exact moment the key is tested, not in the calm hours when everything is going her way, but in this one small bruising moment over a piece of paper. If she drops the assumption here, if she lets the number rewrite her identity back into lack, then every quiet repetition of the word wealthy she has whispered in the dark before sleep was only ever a mood, easily undone by a mood. But if instead she holds the feeling steady, if she looks at the number the way a lantern looks at wind, unmoved, still burning, still itself, then something remarkable happens inside her. She has just proven to her own subconscious that the assumption is not decoration, it is structure, and structure survives weather that decoration cannot. Neville Goddard taught that this is precisely why so many give up at the threshold of their own manifestation. They mistake the resistance for a verdict, when it is only ever a rehearsal. The old state does not vanish the moment a new one is assumed. It lingers for a while, like a tenant who has been given notice but has not yet packed his bags. He still walks through the rooms, still leaves his things lying about, still grumbles in the hallway, and if you mistake his lingering for permanence, you will hand the house right back to him. But if you understand that his presence is temporary, that he is simply finishing out his lease, while the new tenant, your new self, has already legally taken possession, then his noise stops frightening you. You let him grumble, you let the bill arrive, you let the doubting friend speak, and you continue quietly living from the wealthy state anyway, because you know whose house this actually is. Think also of how a farmer behaves after planting a seed. He does not dig it up every evening to check whether it has grown. He does not stand over the soil arguing with it. He simply waters what he can water, and lets the unseen process continue on its own patient schedule. And this is exactly the posture Neville Goddard asked of anyone repeating a single word toward wealth. Water it with feeling each night, and then leave it alone. Let the soil do what soil has always known how to do. The moment you start digging up the seed to check on it, pulling the assumption apart with worry and impatience, you interrupt the very growth you are trying to hasten. Persistence is not anxious checking. Persistence is calm returning, again and again, to the same feeling, the same word, the same quiet knowing, without needing daily proof that it is working. And here is the part most people never hear. Persistence is not a grim, teeth-gritted endurance. It is not white-knuckling your way through disbelief. True persistence in the assumption feels almost restful, because you are not straining to make something happen. You are simply refusing to be talked out of what you have already decided is true. There is a great difference between a person clenching their fists, trying to force a wish into being, and a person who has already settled the matter within themselves and is now simply waiting, unbothered, for the outer world to catch up to a decision that was made in a deeper place than circumstance can reach. Every single time the old evidence tries to argue with your new assumption, that is not proof the word has failed. That is simply the old state, refusing to leave quietly, putting up its last resistance before it finally dissolves. And your only work in that moment is to remain unmoved, to keep feeling wealthy with the same simple confidence with which you feel the ground beneath your feet, not needing to defend it, not needing to prove it, simply persisting, the way water persists against stone, not through force, but through the quiet refusal to stop being what it is. And stone, given enough time, always yields to what persists. So speak this decree with me. I persist in my assumption until the outer world simply agrees. Again, I persist in my assumption until the outer world simply agrees. The eighth key is this. Revision is the quiet undoing of every day that tried to convince you wealth was not your nature. Neville Goddard taught that the day is not over simply because the clock says it is, and that you, the imagining being, hold in your own hands an authority over yesterday that no clock, no calendar, and no bank ledger can override. Most people treat the day as a closed book the moment the sun sets. They let the sting of a missed opportunity or the small shame of an awkward moment sit inside them like a stone swallowed whole, and they carry that stone unexamined into tomorrow, waking up already weighted before the day has even begun. But Neville taught that this is unnecessary, that the day, however it appeared outwardly, was only ever a report, a mirror image cast by the state you were living in when it happened. And a mirror can always be shown a different face. Picture an ordinary evening. A man comes home from work, replaying, again and again, a conversation with his employer. The employer's tone was clipped. The words about the budget were tight. And somewhere in that exchange the man felt small, felt passed over, felt as though he were the sort of person to whom money is always explained rather than given. He carries this feeling through dinner, through the news, through the small talk with his family, letting it season everything, and if he goes to bed with that feeling untouched, he has, without realizing it, cast tomorrow's vote already. He has told his own subconscious, in the clearest language it understands, which is feeling, that he is a man to whom things are tight. But Neville taught that this same man, before sleep, in that soft, drowsy hush, when the arguing mind has finally gone quiet, can return to that exact scene and simply live it differently, not by lying to himself about what was said, but by feeling the version that should have happened, hearing the same employer, but this time meeting the words with an inner ease, an inner knowing that his supply was never actually dependent on that conversation at all. Imagining the tone gentler, imagining himself unbothered, imagining the outcome resolving in his favor, and feeling it now with the same sincerity he had given the sting only hours before. This is not wishful daydreaming. It is not pretending something false happened. It is understanding a deeper fact, that the outer scene was never the cause of his feeling. It was always the effect of a state already within him. And so the revised feeling, held tonight with real sincerity, becomes quietly the account his subconscious now accepts as true, and what the subconscious accepts as true is precisely what it will labor, faithfully and without argument, to reproduce in the days ahead. This is why Neville so often said that no day need defeat you, for even if the outer report was harsh, you are never sealed inside it. You are the one telling the story, and the storyteller may always go back and tell it again, correctly, until the correction is the only version left standing in memory. Think, too, of the small daily wounds so easy to overlook, the glance at a shrinking account balance that tightens the chest, the moment standing at a register doing quiet math with worry, the passing comment from a relative about money that lands harder than it should. None of these need to be argued with in the moment. None of these need a clever reply. They need only be revised later, quietly, in that private hour before sleep, seen again but felt differently. The register moment relived with calm instead of calculation. The relative's comment relived with a smile of quiet knowing instead of a flinch. And slowly, night by night, the accumulated weight of 100 small scenes that once whispered lack begins to lighten, not because the world suddenly changed first, but because you changed first, in the only place change has ever actually mattered, which is your own feeling, your own inner state, your own assumption of what is true about you. And here is the deeper reason this matters so much for the single word you have been repeating. The word wealthy, spoken forward into an imagined future, does powerful work. But if it is contradicted every night by an unrevised day, still shouting the opposite underneath it, the two pull against each other like a rope tied to two different posts. Revision releases the old post entirely, so that the rope and all your strength can finally run in one direction only, forward, toward the very state you have been quietly building. This is why the man who revises faithfully finds his affirmations taking root so much faster than the man who repeats the word by day but leaves the day's wreckage untouched by night. He has stopped fighting himself. He has stopped being two men, one hoping and one grieving, and has become simply one man, one state, one feeling, carried cleanly from evening into morning without contradiction. So tonight, whatever the day handed you, whatever tightened your chest or made you feel smaller than you are, take it gently into that quiet hour before sleep, and simply let it go, the way a hand opens and releases a small bird into open sky, not gripping it, not resenting it, just releasing it upward and letting a truer version rise in its place, feeling the ease you wished you had felt, feeling the confidence you wished you had shown, feeling the wealth that was true of you all along even when the day's report forgot to mention it. And let that be the last feeling you carry into sleep, so that what wakes with you tomorrow is not the old story repeating itself, but the new one, quietly, faithfully, taking its place. So speak this decree with me. Tonight I revise the day and release only ease into tomorrow. Again, tonight I revise the day and release only ease into tomorrow. The ninth key is this, and it is the quiet root beneath every key that came before it. The word wealthy was never really the point at all. The I am behind the word was always the point. Neville Goddard taught that I am is the name of God speaking through you, not a phrase in a story about someone else, but the very awareness of your own being, right now, reading these words, and every state you have ever entered, poverty or plenty, fear or ease, was simply I am, wearing a costume, standing in a room, forgetting for a while that it was the one who walked in. Wealth was never something added to you from outside. It was always simply I am, remembering itself correctly. This is why repeating a single word 1,000 times can quietly rebuild an entire life. Because you were never training a habit, you were reminding the deepest part of yourself, the part that has always been free, always been whole, always been more than any bank statement could measure, of what it already was before the world ever told it otherwise. Picture an ordinary man standing in his kitchen at night, phone in hand, thumb hovering over his banking app, heart tight, checking the number the way a prisoner checks a locked door, hoping it has somehow opened on its own. He has said the word wealthy all week, faithfully, dutifully, and still the number looks the same. And in his disappointment, he does the very thing that keeps every gate closed. He asks the word to save him, instead of asking himself who is speaking it. He never stops to notice that the tightness in his chest, the checking, the hoping, the flinching, all of it is I am, quietly assuming a state called lack, and no word repeated on top of that assumption can outrun the assumption itself. The moment he finally sets the phone down, breathes, and simply feels the stillness of his own presence, not the number, not the app, just the plain fact that he is. That awareness itself is here, whole, requiring nothing from that screen to be complete. Something in the room changes even though nothing outside has moved yet. This is the shift every seeker eventually makes, from managing the word to resting in the one who speaks it. Think of an actor backstage, still wearing the costume of the character he played all evening. A beggar's rags, perhaps, torn and gray, and imagine him walking home still hunched the way the character hunched, still speaking in the character's tired voice, having simply forgotten to take the costume off. This is what most people do with the state called lack. They wore it once, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in a hard season now long past, and they have simply forgotten to take it off. And no one out there is going to walk up and remind them. The reminding must come from within. I am must simply notice, quietly, without drama, that the costume is not the actor, that the rags are not the self, and in that noticing alone, the shoulders begin to straighten, not because circumstances changed first, but because the one wearing them remembered who was underneath. This is why the flame is a better picture than the word. A flame does not struggle to burn. It does not repeat instructions to itself about how to be fire. It simply is fire, and wherever it is placed, it burns. Quietly, without strain. This is what I am is meant to be for you. Not a phrase you must maintain through effort, but a flame you were always carrying. The word wealthy was only ever the wick, a place for the flame to rest and show itself, but the fire itself, the awareness, the aliveness, the sheer fact of being, that was never something you needed to build. You only needed to stop cupping your hand around old drafts of doubt and let the flame breathe as what it already is. When Moses asked for a name to bring back to his people, the answer given was simply, I am that I am, from the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verse 14. And Neville read this not as a title for a distant being enthroned somewhere in the sky, but as the plainest possible description of you, the awareness reading this sentence, the one who has been assuming states all your life without ever pausing to notice you were the one doing the choosing. Every state, wealthy or poor, brave or afraid, was simply, I am, trying on a garment and forgetting, for a while, that it could remove it as easily as it put it on. And once you truly feel this, the entire practice becomes lighter. You are not straining to convince a stubborn universe of something foreign to you. You are simply exhaling, letting the tension of forgetting fall away, remembering the way you remember your own name when someone gently says it to you across a crowded room. That wealth, ease, plenty, these were never far away. They were only waiting behind the single small return to I am. So when you find yourself, some evening, repeating the word and feeling nothing, do not panic and do not force it. Simply stop reaching for the word for a moment and rest instead in the plain, quiet fact of your own presence. Feel that you are. Before you feel that you are wealthy, let being come first, and let the word settle onto that being the way snow settles onto ground that was already there long before the snow arrived. This order matters more than any repetition ever could. I am first, wealthy after, presence first, costume after, and once that order is restored in you, the whole labor of manifesting stops feeling like labor at all. It becomes simply what a flame does when nothing is smothering it. It becomes simply what water does when nothing is damming it. It becomes simply what I am does when it finally remembers that it was never lacking anything to begin with. So speak this decree with me. I am is the wealth, and I remember I am. Again, I am is the wealth, and I remember I am. Here is the whole picture. Wealth is not out there. It is a state you enter. A word repeated with feeling becomes a ladder you climb. That ladder is most easily climbed in the hush before sleep, where you learn to live already in the end. Seated at the table rather than waiting at the door, while the world around you, being simply you pushed out, quietly rearranges itself to agree. All of this resting on a self-concept you consciously choose, held steady through patient persistence, corrected each night through gentle revision, until every layer of it is finally recognized as nothing more than I am, remembering what it always was. If what you have heard today has stirred something quiet and certain in you, and you are ready to stop practicing this occasionally and start living it daily, I welcome you to join the 21-day reality shift, a simple guided path where each day you are led gently back into the end already accomplished, back into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, back into I am, until living this way stops being a technique and simply becomes who you are. Say it with me one last time. I am wealthy. I am at ease. Imagination creates my reality. And as you go now, carry the one word Neville is said to have whispered 1,000 times, not as a phrase you perform, but as the quiet truth of the one who has been I am all along.